Ryan's Office Revenge.
I stood there watching Beverly Martinez walk through my warehouse like she owned the place, her entourage of suits trailing behind her like she was some kind of corporate royalty. 31 years old with an MBA still warm from the printer, while I'd spent the better part of 24 years building this operation from the ground up. The morning had started normal enough. I'd been in the warehouse at 6:30 a.m., like always, checking the overnight shipping reports and making sure the second shift had left everything squared away. The smell of motor oil and metal shavings, the hum of the overhead lights, the distant sound of forklifts moving inventory. This place was as familiar to me as my own living room. Maybe more familiar, considering how many hours I'd put in here over the years. My name's Harold Peterson, and until that Tuesday morning, I was the Senior Operations Director at Consolidated Manufacturing. 47 years old, been with this company since I was 23, back when we were a small family. Outfit with 30 employees and dreams of making it big in the Midwest manufacturing scene. I'd watched us grow from a cramped facility with questionable heating to a modern operation with 150 people on payroll. Hell, I'd personally designed every system that keeps this place running smooth. George Hoffman, our CEO, had built this company from nothing, and I'd been right there with him through the lean years. When we couldn't afford proper inventory software, I'd tracked everything on spreadsheets that I'd stay up all night perfecting. When our biggest supplier tried to gouge us during the 2008 crisis, I'd found 3 new vendors and negotiated contracts that saved us 40%. When that fire at Morrison Industries threatened to kill our biggest account, I'd worked 72 straight hours to reroute their entire supply chain and keep them operational. The company had become as much mine as anyone's, even if my name wasn't on the building. So when Beverly Martinez showed up that Tuesday with her power suit and her confidence announcing she was here to revolutionize our operational paradigms, I should have seen trouble coming. But honestly, I figured she'd be another consultant who'd stick around for a few months, write some reports nobody would read, and disappear with a nice check. I was dead wrong. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Harold," Beverly announced to the assembled group of managers and supervisors, gesturing toward me like I was a piece of outdated equipment they were about to replace. "He'll be transitioning to our new strategic advisory role while I handle day-to-day operations moving forward." Strategic advisory. That's corporate speak for we're putting you out to pasture but don't want a lawsuit. The room went dead quiet. Not a cough, not a shuffle of feet, nothing. You could have heard a pin drop on the concrete floor. Nobody looked at me. Not Roger Campbell, who'd been my right-hand man for 9 years, who'd learned everything he knew about logistics from our late-night problem-solving sessions. Not Andrea Foster from the shipping department, who I'd helped get promoted when she was just a temp worker trying to support her kids. Not even Brenda Walsh, who'd shared coffee breaks with me every morning for over a decade, who knew my coffee order better than my ex-wife ever did. They all found something fascinating about their shoes or clipboards or the ceiling tiles, anywhere but my face. "We need fresh energy in our supply chain management," George said, his voice carrying that forced enthusiasm he used when he was trying to sell something he didn't quite believe himself. His hand rested on Beverly's shoulder like she was his prize student. "Harold can help you understand our history while you lead us into the future." History, there's that word again. I was being turned into a museum exhibit while still breathing. 24 years of building systems, training people, solving problems that kept this place profitable, and now I was just history to be preserved and referenced when convenient. Beverly's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Harold's institutional knowledge will be invaluable as we implement modern operational frameworks," she said, like she was reading from a business school textbook. "But we need to move beyond legacy thinking if we're going to compete in today's market." Legacy thinking. Translation. Everything I'd done to build this place was now considered obsolete. She pointed toward a cramped office near the loading dock, barely bigger than a storage closet. "That corner space will be perfect for your strategic work, Harold. I'll need this main office cleared out by this afternoon. My office. The place where I'd spent countless nights figuring out how to save this company money, streamline our processes, keep our people employed when times got tough." The wall still had the safety award we'd won after I implemented new protocols that cut workplace accidents by 60%. The shelf held thank you letters from clients whose operations I'd saved during emergencies. 24 years of my professional life, and she wanted it cleaned out in 4 hours. "Understood," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my hands wanted to shake. "No point in making a scene. Not yet." The meeting broke up with people avoiding eye contact and mumbling about getting back to work. George clapped Beverly on the shoulder and walked her toward what used to be my office, already talking about exciting changes and new directions. I stood there for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds of the warehouse, watching my team scatter like they couldn't get away from me fast enough. Roger caught my eye for just a second and looked like he wanted to say something, but Beverly called his name and he hurried over to her instead. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be some temporary consultant situation. This was a takeover, and I was the casualty. 3 hours later, I watched maintenance guys haul my filing cabinets down to the basement while Beverly directed the installation of a standing desk and some abstract art where my family photos used to hang. The old furniture looks so outdated, she told them, waving her hand dismissively. We're going for a more modern aesthetic that reflects innovation and forward thinking. The furniture my team had chipped in to buy me when I got promoted to senior director 8 years ago. The desk where I'd trained dozens of young managers, where Roger had come to me when his dad got sick and he needed help navigating the insurance paperwork, where Andrea had sat crying when her divorce was finalized and she didn't know how she'd manage as a single mom. I'd helped her restructure her schedule so she could pick up her kids from school. Now it was all being hauled away like yesterday's garbage. My new office was basically a glorified storage closet with a wobbly chair and a computer that wheezed when it started up. The kind of machine we'd retired from the main floor 5 years ago because it was too slow for inventory tracking. There was barely enough room for a desk and a filing cabinet, and the single window looked out onto the dumpster behind the loading dock. The message couldn't have been clearer if Beverly had hung a sign. This is where we put people we're trying to get rid of. My phone rang almost immediately after I'd squeezed myself behind the tiny desk. Harold, I'm sorry, but Beverly called a meeting in conference room A, Roger said, and I could hear the stress in his voice. He'd been with me long enough to know this whole situation stunk. She said it's just for department heads and senior supervisors. When's the meeting? Right now. She said it's about restructuring the operational hierarchy and implementing new management protocols. I was being locked out of meetings about my own department. The department I'd built from 8 people to 45. The systems I'd designed were being discussed without me in the room. No problem, I lied, because what else was I going to say? That it was a problem? That after 24 years I deserved to be in that room? Roger knew it, I knew it, but neither of us was going to change Beverly's mind by complaining. After hanging up, I tried to log into my computer to check emails. Password had been changed. I called IT. Sorry, Harold, said Tommy from tech support, a kid I'd helped hire 3 years ago when he was fresh out of community college. Beverly requested security restrictions on certain accounts during the transition period. I have to follow protocol. Even my email access had been cut off, in my own department. I sat there for a minute, listening to the muffled sounds of the warehouse through the thin walls, forklifts moving inventory, workers calling out shipping updates, the steady rhythm of productivity that I'd helped orchestrate for over 2 decades. All of it happening without me now. Around 4:30, I found an email from Beverly that someone had printed out and left on my desk. Must have been Brenda. She was the only one who still looked me in the eye when she passed by. The subject line read, Embracing Innovation, Moving Beyond Legacy Protocols. I opened it and felt my chest tighten. Attached was a 22-page presentation about modernizing our supply chain management. It was scheduled for the board meeting next week with Beverly presenting as the author. But these weren't just similar ideas to what I'd developed over the past 8 years. These were my exact systems, down to the specific vendor rotation schedules and inventory management algorithms. The supplier evaluation matrices I'd spent months perfecting. The cost reduction strategies that had saved the company over $2 million annually. Even the emergency protocols I'd written after the Morrison fire. Everything had Beverly's name on it. Every innovation, every efficiency improvement, every process optimization that had made our department the most profitable in the company. She'd taken 8 years of my work and repackaged it as her breakthrough thinking. The same protocols George had called Harold's Magic Touch at last year's board meeting were now being presented as next-generation operational frameworks designed for modern manufacturing environments. I read through the whole thing twice, looking for any acknowledgement of my work, any mention that these weren't her original ideas. Nothing. According to this presentation, Beverly Martinez had arrived at consolidated manufacturing and immediately identified numerous inefficiencies in our legacy operations that could be resolved through her innovative approach. My hands were shaking slightly by the time I finished reading. Not from anger, not yet, but from the sheer audacity of what she was doing. This wasn't just about pushing me aside. This was systematic theft of intellectual property, wrapped up in corporate buzzwords and delivered with a smile. At 5 p.m. sharp, a sticky note appeared on my desk. My office, 5:15. Beverly. Not my old office anymore. Her office now. I found her leaning against what used to be my desk, tapping away on her phone like I wasn't worth looking at directly. The space had been completely transformed. My industry awards were gone, replaced with her MBA diploma and some generic motivational posters about disruption and innovation. The comfortable chairs where I'd had countless one-on-one meetings with my team had been replaced with modern, uncomfortable-looking things that seemed designed to keep meetings short. "Sit," she said without glancing up from her phone. I stayed standing. After 24 years in this company, I wasn't going to be ordered around like a disobedient dog. She finally looked up with this practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind of expression they probably taught in business school for handling difficult subordinates. "Your operational efficiency presentation was very well received in today's meeting. You mean my operational efficiency? Protocols?" Her smile never wavered. "Your research provided useful groundwork, certainly. But groundwork isn't architecture, Harold. I've modernized and elevated your basic concepts into something actionable for the 21st century. Basic concepts. 8 years of innovation, problem-solving, and continuous improvement reduced to basic concepts that needed her MBA magic to become useful." "You copied my vendor management system word for word," I said, keeping my voice level. "The supplier evaluation matrices, the inventory rotation schedules, even the emergency protocols I wrote after the Morrison fire." "That's not modernizing, Beverly. That's plagiarism." "That's a serious accusation," she replied, setting her phone down with deliberate precision, "especially from someone in your position." "My position?" She leaned back in my old chair like she'd been sitting there for years instead of hours. People who've been at one company too long often become territorial about processes, resistant to necessary changes. It's a well-documented phenomenon in organizational psychology. The words hit like a slap. She'd been studying how to undermine me, probably had a whole playbook for dealing with difficult long-time employees. "George understands this transition might be challenging for you," she continued, her tone shifting to something that might have been sympathy if it wasn't so calculated. The implication was crystal clear. She'd been poisoning the well with George, positioning me as the problem before I even knew there was a problem to be had. "Is that why you excluded me from the department meeting today?" She sighed like I was a child having a tantrum. I needed honest feedback about operational leadership effectiveness. People aren't comfortable speaking candidly with their former supervisor present. It creates an inhibiting dynamic that prevents authentic assessment. Former supervisor. She'd already rewritten the org chart in her head, and apparently in everyone else's too. "Besides," she continued, "we're restructuring next month anyway. Some positions will be eliminated as we streamline operations. Others will evolve into new roles that require different skill sets. Your future here depends entirely on your ability to adapt to new leadership paradigms." The threat couldn't have been clearer if she'd put it in neon letters. Conform or be terminated. After 24 years of making this company profitable, keeping it running through economic downturns, building systems that literally kept the lights on, I was being given an ultimatum by someone who'd been here less than a week. "Is there anything else?" I asked quietly, not trusting myself to say more. "Actually, yes. The Morrison Industries contract renewal meeting tomorrow morning. I'll be handling that personally. Walter Morrison." I'd built that relationship over 16 years, through good times and bad. When their plant had that fire in 2018, I'd worked around the clock to reroute their supply chain and keep them operational. When they needed custom modifications to our standard products, I'd personally overseen the engineering changes. Walter had specifically requested me for all major contract discussions because he trusted me, trusted our history together. "Walter asked for me to be there," I said. "He's been our client longer than you've been out of college. I spoke with Walter this morning. He understands the new direction we're taking. Fresh perspective, innovative approaches. He's actually quite excited about the possibilities." Bullshit. Walter Morrison was old-school manufacturing, the kind of guy who valued relationships and reliability over flashy presentations. But if Beverly had already gotten to him, convinced him that change was coming whether he liked it or not, she was systematically stripping away everything I'd built. My office, my role, my relationships with clients I'd served for years. Not just demoting me, but erasing me entirely, piece by piece. That's all, she said, turning her attention back to her phone like I'd already ceased to exist. I walked out, passing the glass-walled conference room where my team was still in their meeting. They went quiet as I passed, eyes darting away like I had some contagious disease. Whatever Beverly had told them about me, about my territorial behavior and resistance to change, had poisoned the well completely. Back at my new closet office, I found an email from HR waiting on my desk. Someone had printed it out since I still couldn't access my computer. Performance Improvement Plan, confidential, a formal PIP, the first step toward termination. The document was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, resistance to innovative leadership initiatives, territorial behavior regarding departmental protocols, difficulty adapting to changing organizational structures. Each phrase was carefully chosen to sound reasonable while being vague enough that Beverly could interpret my actions however she wanted. I'd given 24 years to this company, worked through pneumonia twice because we were short-staffed during peak season, missed my daughter Jennifer's graduation ceremony when that supplier crisis threatened to shut down production for a week, postponed my vacation 3 different times when Roger's team needed help implementing the new inventory system. Came in on weekends, stayed late on weeknights, carried my work phone everywhere in case of emergencies. Now I was being pushed out by someone who'd built her entire strategy on stealing my work and convincing everyone that I was the problem. I shut down the wheezing computer, grabbed my jacket, and walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. No point in making it awkward for people who were clearly trying to distance themselves from me. In my truck in the parking lot, I sat for 20 minutes staring at nothing, feeling the strange calm replace the initial shock. The late afternoon sun was slanting through the windshield, warming the interior, and I could hear the distant sounds of the second shift arriving for work. Life going on, business as usual, like nothing had changed. They thought they were watching a man being gradually erased from his own company. Expected anger, maybe a dramatic resignation letter, possibly some kind of emotional breakdown that would justify everything they'd done. They had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, I didn't call my brother to vent about corporate politics. Didn't crack open a beer and feel sorry for myself while watching the news. Instead, I went to my home office and pulled out my personal external drive, the one where I'd been backing up every project, every efficiency report, every supplier contract negotiation for the past 15 years. Not because I'd been planning for this moment, but because I'd always believed in protecting institutional knowledge. You never knew when you might need to reference an old solution to solve a new problem, or when some crisis would require you to understand exactly how a system had been built from the ground up. What I found as I started digging through those files made my hands shake slightly. You see, I'd always paid attention to patterns. That's what made me good at operations, noticing when things didn't add up, when numbers looked wrong, when people's stories had holes in them. And as I dug through my files that night, Beverly's story started showing more holes than Swiss cheese. It took me until 3 a.m., but I'd compiled something that would change everything. Beverly Martinez hadn't just landed at Consolidated Manufacturing by coincidence. Her previous company, Precision Components, Inc., had gone bankrupt 18 months ago after implementing what they called revolutionary efficiency protocols, the same protocols she was now trying to push here. The same cost-cutting measures, the same supplier restructuring, even the same buzzwords about modernizing legacy operations. But here's what really got my attention. 6 months before Precision Components collapsed, Beverly had received substantial consulting fees from an investment group called Midwest Acquisition Partners, the same investment group that had been sniffing around our company for the past year, making offers George kept rejecting because he wanted to keep the business in the family. I spent the next 2 days digging deeper, using my industry contacts to piece together the real story. Called up Jim Henderson, who used to run procurement at Precision Components before they went under. What he told me made my blood run cold. "Harold, that woman was poison," Jim said when I reached him at his new job. "She came in talking about efficiency improvements, but every change she made weakened us, cut our best suppliers, eliminated quality controls that had kept us competitive for 20 years. By the time we figured out what was happening, we were bleeding money and clients. What happened after the bankruptcy? Midwest Acquisition swooped in and bought our client list for pennies on the dollar. Turns out they'd been planning it all along. Beverly got a nice bonus and disappeared, left 180 people without jobs. The pattern was clear as daylight. Beverly wasn't here to improve consolidated manufacturing. She was here to sabotage it from the inside, make it vulnerable for acquisition by her real employers. The efficiency protocols she'd stolen from me weren't meant to work long-term. They were designed to show short-term gains while undermining our foundation, making us look profitable enough to buy, but weak enough to control. Friday morning, I arrived at work early, before the security guard finished his rounds. I'd spent Thursday night preparing one final document, a comprehensive analysis of Beverly's background, her connection to Midwest Acquisition Partners, and the timeline of how she'd systematically destroyed her previous company using the exact same playbook she was implementing here. I placed a single manila folder on Beverly's desk with a simple note: "For your review, historical operational analysis and competitive intelligence patterns." Then I went to handle my 8 a.m. call with our steel supplier, one of the few meetings still on my calendar. When I got back at 10:30, something had clearly happened. People were huddled in groups throughout the warehouse, conversations stopping abruptly when they saw me. Security guards were stationed outside the executive offices, and I could see George through his glass door with his phone pressed to his ear, gesturing frantically while pacing back and forth. Brenda hurried over to me, eyes wide with excitement and confusion. "Harold, what did you do?" I shared some historical context about operational efficiency patterns. I replied calmly. "Beverly ran into George's office about 20 minutes ago yelling about harassment and false accusations. Then security came, and now the whole executive team's been locked in there with some people from the board." I nodded and headed toward my little closet office, feeling strangely peaceful for the first time in days. "Aren't you worried?" Brenda asked, following me. "About what?" "About—" She gestured vaguely toward the executive wing where you could see suits moving around behind frosted glass. "No," I said simply. "I'm not worried at all." At noon, an email from George's assistant appeared on my desk, printed out again since I still couldn't access my computer. "Meeting requested. Main conference room. Immediate." The walk to the executive floor felt surreal. Every eye in the building was on me, some curious, others fearful. Whatever was happening had rippled through the entire company like an earthquake. I found George at the head of the conference table, flanked by Janet Rodriguez from legal and Patricia Williamson from the board of directors. Beverly was nowhere to be seen, and George looked like he'd aged 10 years since Tuesday. "Sit down, Harold," George said, his voice hoarse. I took a seat directly across from him, keeping my hands steady on the table. "The file you left for Beverly," he began slowly. "Where did you get that information?" "Company archives, supplier communications, and publicly available financial records," I replied. "Everything's documented and verifiable." Janet leaned forward, her expression grim. "Harold, you've made extremely serious allegations about corporate espionage and deliberate sabotage." "I haven't made allegations," I corrected her. "I compiled data and identified patterns. The evidence speaks for itself." George rubbed his temples like he had the mother of all headaches. "You're claiming Beverly deliberately implemented strategies at her previous company that led to its collapse, and now she's replicating those same strategies here for the benefit of outside investors. The data supports that conclusion, yes. Beverly's been suspended, pending a full investigation," Patricia said quietly. "The board is bringing in external auditors tonight if what you've documented proves accurate. We're looking at criminal charges." Over the next week, the whole story unraveled. The external investigators confirmed everything I'd found and more. Beverly hadn't just been stealing my operational protocols. She'd been feeding our entire competitive strategy to Midwest Acquisition Partners, setting us up for the same kind of engineered bankruptcy that had destroyed Precision Components and 3 other manufacturing firms over the past 5 years. By the following Friday, Beverly's name had been scrubbed from the company directory and the FBI was involved. My phone started ringing that same day. Word travels fast in manufacturing circles when someone exposes corporate espionage. "Mr. Peterson, this is Linda Stevens from Midwest Industrial Solutions. We'd like to discuss a chief operating officer position with you." That was the first of 6 calls I got that week. Turns out protecting American manufacturing jobs and exposing industrial sabotage makes a man pretty marketable. But the real satisfaction wasn't the job offers or the vindication. It was walking through that warehouse Monday morning and seeing Roger and Andrea and the rest of my team back to their normal selves, no longer worried about losing their livelihoods to some efficiency scheme designed to destroy us from within. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's protecting what matters and proving that experience, loyalty, and paying attention to the details will always triumph over flashy credentials and corporate sabotage schemes designed to fool people who should know better. If this story teaches you anything, it's that the people trying to erase your contributions usually can't build anything themselves. They can only steal what others have created and slap their name on it. And when you've spent decades building something real, with real relationships and real knowledge that can't be faked, the truth always has a way of coming out, especially when you're patient enough to let the evidence speak for itself.